So Shannon and I are going to be hosting tonight. I have a piece of land. I'm Rochelle Wilhite. I'm the designated broker of Best Choice Realty. And this topic tonight stretches across all states. It works for just about everything. The content is very applicable if you're living in Washington or you're living in Oregon or Idaho, or you're licensed in any of those states, even in Utah. The content that we've created tonight would apply to any client or any agent that's looking at. I've got a piece. Shannon, I think you ran into this a lot. We started talking about.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think I just type in my email. I have a piece of land, and there's like at least a dozen emails that will pop up of people that have sent me stuff where they're needing help, they have questions. So it's certainly well worth the time tonight to kind of go through some of the basics and then kind of introduce you to some more advanced topics as well.
Perfect. So we're going to just dive right in. And I like to say it with podcasters. They say like they want to unpack it. Well, we're going to dive right in and we're going to start to unpack, right?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the opportunities because I think a lot of you don't realize that there are a ton of opportunities out there. This was an email that I received from an agent, not even from our company. She sent me this email and she basically said, I have a listing appointment. She's working at another company. Tuesday at 11 o'clock, that's tomorrow, you guys, for a possible land development. I was thinking you might be interested in this. And we could do a 50-50 on the listing side. So she's already pre-negotiating. She knows what obviously my skill set is in handling land. The property has a preliminary short plat for 16 homes, according to the seller. Again, we never know what the seller is going to say to try to get us to come out and do an appointment. But the preliminary permit was extended. I did a typo over the 2027. Sorry about the typo there. The seller wants 1.2 million. So that doesn't sound like too bad of a deal when you really break it down in this area of 16 houses with 1.2 million. But this takes work. That's the one thing I would say. What else would you say, Shannon, when you get an email like this that you consider?
Well, yeah, this one's got every piece of land has some hair on it. You know, it's there's always a little bit of hair on it, and sometimes they're in hairy spots that you don't want to talk about, but they're there. But no, I think when we get stuff like this, and we get these all the time where people are like, "Hey, Shannon, can you partner on this with me?" Or Rochelle, can you help me with this? There's a lot of just
There's a
a
lot of
lack of
questions.
confidence, I think, and
Yeah.
a lot of agents where they just haven't done it before, or it feels like it's out of their wheelhouse because it's got a little hair on it and they're not familiar with working with that particular zoning or having a farm or having agriculture or
Yeah. And you're kind of blipping out, Shannon. So let's go to the next slide.
but I think the biggest takeaway that I always tell you still listen.
You're a little choppy on your side.
Are you still Michelle?
Yeah,
That's
I'm
okay.
still here. So let's go to the next slide and let's jump into it because that's kind of the talk of the town, right? We're going to talk about what are the things to consider? Well, land, you don't deal with inspections in the same way you would do with a single family home or a commercial property that's got actual structures. It becomes very important to negotiate feasibility. Basically, the amount of time that it's going to take your client, either your buyer or your seller, or I mean, it could be a buyer, it could be a seller who at some point will be a seller, an investor. They want to have time to be able to do their feasibility. So when we see these types of opportunities, you want to think about what is it? I'm definitely going to ask questions, especially with the example before. I mean, I want to ask more questions to the seller who is wanting to list that property. And in this case, in this example right here with this plat already done and this, preliminary plat map that we pulled from Chicago Title, it says there are endless possibilities on this 2.25 acre farm, calling all developers and builders, subdivide, stub out, build some magnificent homes with stunning views. The clearing is done for you and the land is ready for you to dig. If I had you guys put a marketing remarks like this up and you were to actually walk the land and you didn't have the ability to subdivide and the clearing is done for you. I mean, there was obviously some glaring details of things that were not done right with this particular land parcel. So you could be putting yourself out there as a listing agent, writing marketing remarks that when you actually are advertising and marketing this, you could be jeopardizing your license. So I don't mean to scare you, but luckily this is not marketing remarks of one of our best choice agents, Shannon. This is from another company. But when I saw this listing pop up, and I thought, my goodness, 2.25 acre farm, that sounds nice. Yes, there's calling all developers and builders, but oh my gosh, are we really putting it out there that this can be subdivided when the septic tank is on the line of an adjacent neighbor? There's a lot more that we started to unpack when we were looking at this property to actually purchase it. So be very careful when you're writing remarks. You may want to put in remarks if you're not sure, buyer to verify. That might be a good thing to say in your marketing remarks to again protect you, because again, this is what the seller has asking you to advertise or market. And if the feasibility turns up something other than that, then are you marketing something that is not proper, or is something that you have knowledge about or could easily obtain knowledge about, and marketing that kind of out of line, outside of your scope of your licensing. So the first thing you want to do when you are working with a vacant parcel of land, whether you're a buyer or whether you're a seller, you're representing one of those individual parties. There's my happy mom right there buying her piece of land. That's, if you want to know what my mom looks like, I guess she looks pretty good, you guys, I will say, for her age. But she bought her an investment piece of land that was adjacent to her single family residence. And so the one thing you want to do, even if it's your mom, if you're representing your mom, you want to make sure that your priority is your clients. And that should be your first priority. Obviously, you want to keep your license, but the second thing would be make sure your client is protected. That they're going to hire you and sign an agreement, an agency agreement for you to represent them in the negotiation, the location, the finding, any of that type of work that they're going to be asking you to help them with. And now, if she was selling the land, same thing, we need to make sure that their priority comes first. So you'll want to ask them all kinds of questions about their intent, what their experience has been to buy land. In my mom's case, she knew nothing. She didn't even know what an easement was. We had to have the attorney explain what an easement was. So that's the type of work that you're going to need to do, is make sure you're asking all the questions. So you could, well, Rochelle, I don't know what I don't know, right? So that's what we're going to kind of give you some basics today. So if we go to the next slide, so we're going to give you some basic vocabulary that you can use. And some of you that are new to the business, you may want to take a picture of this and get some more, answers and practice, answering some of these questions, because when you're working with people, they want answers now. And so if you can answer these questions or know how to talk intelligently about platting, plat and build. What does that mean? Shannon, want to kind of go through it? Not dry on the screen, huh? We're learning
Yeah,
through
yeah,
Zoom
that's
today.
okay. Yeah, so there's the plats and the bill. So how many are there, I think, is kind of the important thing. You have different plats. And we've got variances. So I think, why don't you tell them what a variance is, Rochelle, for
Let's
the
go
ease.
back one step. So platting means that you could have a parcel that's large, right? And then if they plat it, meaning if they create individual tax ID numbers, because that's how a lot of these things are done. Sometimes you have this big, big parcel, like the very first scenario where you have, 12 acres, and that could be platted. That could be platted so that you could have multiple tax ID numbers and actually could build on something like that. But then there's a process for getting that done. The sooner you have a conversation with the seller in that case, then the easier it will be for you to align your goals with helping them get the highest price and helping them with the marketing to sell the land, basically to plat and then build. I don't know if some of you guys didn't know, when we had a training last week in the office, you didn't know you could take listings like that. You actually can. You can take a listing where you, at some point, you're going to be platting it and getting a tax ID number, and you can market that as a potential that's coming down the pipe as future inventory. There's a form on Northwest MLS that you can do, that you can take that listing before it's actually ready for building. And a lot of new agents don't know that. And so a lot of the rookie agents will need to learn that there is a way to take those opportunities. And I would say if you have never done a plat and build, we have quite a few experienced brokers, managing brokers, in fact, who would be happy to help you with those types of projects. We do not want to say no to that and let those projects go to other people and other companies. So plat and build, those are some great opportunities. If you run into sellers who want to sell and they don't want the hassle of platting and building, we can connect them up with people. We have a lot of people in-house that can assist them with those types of projects. Variance would be something that, the city or the county or the jurisdiction, and they're allowing a variance based on what's been done or what was already part of the property when it was originally platted. So that's what a variance is. It's kind of like an exception to the rule. We're just going to keep going down the line, Shannon. Trust estates, LLC. A lot of times when you're dealing with property owners that need to have land to sell, they're going to be in these types of formations. They're going to be a trust, there's going to be an estate, or there's going to be an LLC. Most of the land that you're going to find are going to need your know-how on how to work with title and escrow in determining how people sign, who's the decision maker, who has the legal authority to sell or to handle that type of event that happened in that person's life. So be prepared to have conversation. You may need some more education from your title company on how to handle trust estates or LLCs. We certainly can help you in the office, but that's something you're going to run into a lot more with the vacant land. Most people that have vacant land, raw land, they thought, oh, grandma's going to develop at some point in time, but then grandma passes away. So now there's this opportunity that exists where if you know who the decision maker is, you often have those opportunities that you have to list and then potentially plat and build, or you may want to just turn it over to another investor where you can cash that person out and then actually get them the money that the estate needs, and then basically somebody else takes it from there. So there's different entities that you need to be aware of when you're dealing with vacant land. Certainly permits. I think that's a lot of times where people are writing up feasibility to see if they can get permits from their local city or county or utility to actually do what they're potentially going to build on the land. So that's permits becomes important to understand how that works. Every state, every city, every county has different processes. That's why you want to know kind of roughly how long it's going to take in a specific to get preliminary plat approval or preliminary so we can decide how we want to structure the offer to protect our buyers. Wetland and geotech survey. In many areas of Western Washington, a wetland and a geotech become essential. In fact, they won't issue a permit until the wetland and the geotech is done. So that's why it takes sometimes a long time. Whenever you're,
Sometimes they also call them punching holes. You'll hear stuff like this.
yep,
And they can only be
perking,
done during
that's also,
certain times of the year.
yep, they call it perking in some areas
Yep.
of our, so those types of words are used kind of same type of, you could count all of that as like some way of permit or permission to build or to develop. You kind of want to listen in on that type of language as well. Bottom line, with you talking about permits, wetland, geotech survey, the more you can gather with your seller, say you're going to list a parcel of land. Shannon and I have done some land before in the past. Shannon, how long does it usually take when we have just say it's a raw piece of just simple one tax ID? We had two at one time, but just say this is a simple 9,000 square foot lot. It's buildable. How long do you think we should plan on
Oh, for listing it?
selling? Yeah,
Yeah.
we're gonna list it.
Yeah, I mean, land takes a while. This is not a 30-day turn.
No.
So most land listings that we see for the people that list a lot of land, it's a year, year and a half,
Mhm.
something like that. And the reason for that is that you're looking in many cases for cash, or the people with the wherewithal to basically do a build after the purchase. So they
Or
take
it
a
takes
little
a
bit
while
longer.
or it takes a while to do the feasibility, right? To get
Yeah.
get it through the process. And
Yep.
so we're waiting for the city, the county, the utility, whatever, to make their decision on what can be built and whether something will go forward. So plan on more time on your listing agreements. I used to tell people, Take a 6-month listing for a house that's, it's a residential, and take a year listing for vacant land parcel. It does take a lot longer to market and advertise and collect all the information and work through the feasibility and the studies in order to get something closed. So it's not for the faint-hearted, and they're not typically quick, although we have seen some land go fairly quickly in the Puget Sound region. Clearing. So sometimes words like clearing, they've cleared the land, that means like timber removal. Sometimes that requires permits as well. So again, keep that in mind with clearing or removing vehicles from the land. That can take some additional time. But watch that vocabulary, and that might be something you want to ask as far as questions. You're like, I don't know what to ask this listing agent. Well, they've listed very little. In fact, you pretty much need to go walk the property in order to figure out what they're selling. I find a lot of listing agents do a very poor job at marketing what they have to sell. So don't be that type of agent. Make sure that you're gathering as much as information as you can from the seller ahead of time, such as, is there a wetland? Is there a geotech survey? Is there permits that you started, even if they've been in the past? Are there variances? Are there easements? Can you tell me
Yeah.
more about what your intention was for this property and why you decided you did not want to sell at that time? Get as much information, ask a ton of questions to that seller before you take that listing. And you can do that, obviously get the listing agreement signed. And then as you're preparing the marketing and advertising, ask all those questions. You definitely want to do that before you hit the active button. And it doesn't matter which state you're working out of, it goes for every state. You want to get as much information as you can about the vacant parcel.
So kind of just for sake of time, I think we're going to breeze through a couple of these other ones
Mm-hmm.
here at the end. But the other one that comes up a lot in conjunction with clearing is whether or not things are on a grade, how graded they are. When you talk about buildability, if you've got a house or a land piece that's like this, well, how many can you actually actually lay on that property for homes and things like that? Utilities, this comes up a lot with land, is where are the utilities? Are they stubbed, or are they just at the street? Have they actually been run to the property, or are they just available? That comes up a lot, and that could be a big difference when you're talking
Well,
about downtown
in
areas.
Spokane, I mean, they put it, it's in the street, but again, we're asking deeper questions. When you have a buyer who's interested, we want to know more about that. Or the
Yep.
cost to actually stub out the utilities, or to bring the sewer to the property. Those are questions that would be
Right.
helpful, not only on the buy side, but also on the sell side to kind of meet the clients where they need to be.
Yeah. And I think kind of I'm going to skip ahead to zoning just because at the end of the day, we have to pay attention to the client's best interest. What are they wanting to do with it? What do they want? And what is the zoning? Is it R5? Is it R1? Like what is it? Is it grandfathered into certain zoning? If they're wanting to turn it into a duplex or put a dadu on it, I mean, knowing what the current zoning or what the projected zoning is for the property is going to be important for you.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. So we do want to engage vendors. Please don't be the one that says, I checked with the county or the city and this is what they said. I know a lot of you want to overhelp, and we're going to share a couple examples. I think we'll have some time at the end here to share some examples. But instead, put your client, your buyer, your seller. My mom, I put her in touch with an attorney. She had some very specific questions after she purchased the land about the easement and how to rework the easement and do potentially a lot line adjustment. I didn't want to be the one to made that call or made that decision, although I could probably answer most of those questions. Somebody better suited would be a CPA, an attorney, definitely title. If you kind of have something weird that shows up on the title report when you pull it up, that would be the title officer that client should make a phone call, make an appointment to talk to. Definitely have a surveyor. If you're unsure about a property line, you could have it written in subject to a survey. You could have that written in sometimes, and that helps put the buyer at ease, knowing that they paid for the survey, it's the line that they have determined, and that will help them determine what price to offer and negotiate. So oftentimes when I'm negotiating a feasibility study, and my buyer is looking at maybe platting, they'll hire their own surveyor to actually survey whatever line they're talking about doing. And that's a cost that was negotiated. So for example, I may not put up any earnest money. I may do a note, right, where we'll put up the earnest money once we get past feasibility because my client has already spent the money in what we call feasibility studies, such as surveying and things like that, to make sure that the property will work for them. So we're not going to put up an earnest money until we get past all of the feasibility study. That's common as well in some of these larger plats. City, county, planning department, obviously engage them as much as possible, and utility companies. Those are vendors you need to engage if you're going to be working with vacant land. Let's go to the next slide. Step one would be review any kind of information that the listing agent has put together for you, such as the title, any maps, deeds, easements, CC&Rs, drive the neighborhood. What they put up sometimes is not what you actually see. I've seen a lot of people put stuff up from even like before the pandemic. I saw a vacant land parcel. He put a picture of what it looked like not only 5 years ago, that was the photo that I saw. Well, obviously the trees have grown up and there was this huge wetland that took up half of the, so I mean, just by driving by the land parcel, I'm not going to waste my time bringing that one to my buyer's attention saying, hey, this will work for you to build your dream home on. Clearly the listing agent did a bad job, but that's not my job. I represent the buyer in that instance. So definitely look at the property. What does it appear to be, from the listing? Ask the questions to the listing agent. Try to get as much information as you can. What do you think is the best use of the property would be? How is it currently zoned? And are you covered by the county and city planning department? Have you worked with them before? What's their process look like so that you can help that buyer get through the steps that are needed for your buyer to end up purchasing? That's the end in mind. Working from the end in mind would be how I'd sell a vacant land parcel. Let's go to the next.
I've always told when I've listed land, I tell the buyers that call about it. I say, go get your rain boots on, go go trek around, go poke your head around and walk the property because ultimately that's what they're buying. They're buying raw land.
But don't have them walk the property without you. You definitely have a buyer. In order for you to get all the information collected from the listing agent, from the seller, the disclosures, the plat maps, the things that you're going to need to help your buyer make a decision, it's going to require you to have a buyer agency agreement with that particular buyer. So make sure that they're not tromping around in the rain boots, Shannon, unless they have an agency agreement.
Right.
But certainly that gets the ball rolling, gets you gathering all that information. It doesn't hurt for you to tour it with them, but that actually is not as common as it used to be back in the day. A lot of times they will tramp around the property, make sure that that's going to be okay with the listing agent. They're usually fine with it. Sometimes it's marked, other times it's not. I find probably more so it's not marked as far as where the lines are. And so then your buyer may be looking at something that's not completely correct using their little phones and their apps to try to make sense of where it's at. So try to make that part of tromping around the property a little bit easier for your buyer by gathering more information to help them be prepared when they show up on the property.
Yeah, and I think also just because a lot of the times if you're working in kind of those higher density areas as well, having at least good relationships with the neighbors because they're ultimately, you don't want to upset the neighbors where people are parking or thinking that people when they're showing they think they're buying the neighbor's property. You really do not want to upset the neighbors as well because those are the future neighbors of the person who's going to buy this piece of land. So understand from them what they've seen in terms of property lines, whether or not there's a fence, where that would be, make them feel comfortable about marketing or where the sign needs to be, things like that to direct people to the correct piece of land.
I put in their cost is zero, but that's something we should discuss, Shannon. I mean, it takes time is money. And so I would say that's when I put cost is zero, that's not really correct because it is your time. You'll want to negotiate what your time is worth to represent a buyer when they're purchasing land. So just like you do when you're working with a residential or a commercial buyer, you're going to want to establish what is your rate? How much time is it going to take for you to connect all of the pieces together that will help your buyer make a decision on what they're going to offer on this vacant land parcel?
Yeah.
We are
But this
seeing,
one is, it's for the client though. I mean, this part, other than your time as representing them, their hard cost to do this portion of feasibility, if you will, is fairly minimal. I mean, as you start kind of talking about geotech surveys and clearing and permitting, all those things cost a lot more money to put down and to improve the property. But this stage of the game is all spec, is kind of what we typically say.
okay, let's go to the next slide. So is this over helping versus gathering? So that's the word we want to use today. Some of you are over helping, and we just want to be gatherers. So Scott, Chrisandra, I'm hoping I got the right department. I'm hoping to connect with someone in the planning department for real estate development. I'm in the gathering stage of a development project. So I think I gave you the answer, you guys. We made it easy on the first example. This would be gathering. So we're not over helping and saying that we're the person that's doing the fee. We never do the feasibility for the client. Never, never, never. We're gatherers. We're not over helping, or we're not the one that's responsible for the feasibility. We negotiate the feasibility term in the contract, but we're not doing the feasibility to determine whether this property will work for my mom. Okay, I never did that when my mom bought. I said, what is your goals? What are you trying to do? I want to stop a developer from developing on this land that's adjacent to mine. What can you do to stop that? I said, what we'll do is we'll buy it, and if you don't have any desire of building on it, then we will offer what we're going to offer on it. And we'll provide a feasibility for you to talk with the title department. But if you're not planning on developing it, there's nothing more we need to do. So those are that's kind of the advice based on your client. But I never was the one that went down to the city. I provided for my mom to go into the city to figure out what could be done or what limitations she would have if she was to pick up this adjacent parcel. That was not my decision. I did not help her make that decision. That was something that she did. I gathered the information. I provided my mom with the city planning department's phone number. I arranged for her to meet with them. I also contacted the title department and made sure that she had the name and the phone number of who issued the title policy. I was not the one that sat on the phone and listened to the title policy. But in this case, this agent did not overhelp. In fact, it looks like I spoke with Scott, the city of Sumner today, regarding here are my notes. We need to get in contact with the neighbor to present our finds and see what her timeline is. I have tasks scheduled for later this week and an update on Friday. So again, this is just gathering information and providing the information so that the buyer could make their decision. Let's go to the next slide, Jan. You want to talk to this one? So this is a
Yeah,
example.
this is something. So once you have a piece identified, a vacant land, raw land identified, one of the best things that you can do if you've got someone, a small mid-level builder, something like that, the best thing you can do is to set an appointment with the planning department, or like in this previous email that we had, connect with them so you can kind of figure out what they're doing. So in this particular situation that we had here before, I mean, they're telling me it's a low density, I'm looking at here, zoning on the parcel is low density residential, 7,200 minimum lot size, development could be 20%, 6,000 square feet. This stuff is all good. Right of way easement, I mean, that's all good stuff to know. Now imagine you did not know that and you bought a piece of raw land and then you find out later you can't do a flag lot, and now you can only really have, but this is really only one property. So is that piece of land now devalued based off what is it worth what you're paying for in that situation? So one of the best things you can do is have a conversation with the local planning department, whether that's the county or the city, to have a conversation about what the zoning, the setbacks, what the wetland buffers are, if there's checklists. This particular city has like all of these applications and checklists. You can see they've got a demo checklist, fire detection, alarm detect, all sorts of stuff on here that might be helpful for your client and you as the listing agent to know as you're putting something on the market that's raw land.
Right. And this goes for if you're a listing agent or a buyer's agent, you should be very, very much in tune with what's going on in the local planning department. Okay.
Utilities as well. I think this comes up quite a bit when we're dealing with, especially with septics and wells and things of that nature. But knowing what the utilities are for a certain property are helpful. Like, what are the neighbors doing? Again, the city or the county might know the answer to these questions if your seller doesn't. but understanding where those would look like if you needed to get utilities to the property rather than them just being quote unquote at the street. What is it going to cost to actually have them come through? Those types of things. So PSC is really big in Washington. So this is the link for them specifically for builders and things like that. But septics, I think setbacks is the big thing for septics, right, Rochelle? Is this
Fun, and what did they'll perk? I mean, they have to,
yeah.
you got to be able to make sure that it will work for your connecting all that water and all of that, make sure you've got that connection done correctly. It does take some designing and it does take some time, and that you're on a schedule and there's a limited amount of people, depending on where you're located, that will come out and evaluate that property. So you have to really plan on some more time. I think our feasibility, the generic one in Washington, is like a 30-day feasibility. It might be less.
Yeah, sometimes it's not enough. For some projects, it's just the right amount of time. But when you're talking about bigger scale, if you've got many, many acres, or you're talking about working with a client that wants to put an apartment complex on top of a plat, something like that, those things can take longer than 30 days,
Yeah.
because they have to get approval from the county and the city. And if they end up not being able to put that apartment building on there, or have it change the zoning so that it can be commercial or something like that. It can take time. It can take longer. A lot of those, the commercial vacant lands, they take anywhere from 6 to 12 months sometimes just for those things to even close after they go pending. So it's a very big variance in terms of how long some things will take.
This is a nice, you put a checklist. I like that Shannon put this up on the screen here for us. This is the land division application checklist for building. You can see that they have everything from site plans to title reports to health plat, water availability letter, rec plan. It depends on what they're trying to get, and there's checklists associated with all of that. So there's a lot to it. This is just not, oh, it's approved or it's not approved. We as agents basically are trying to get our clients enough time. We're negotiating price, we're negotiating time, earnest money, and the terms. So that's kind of what we're negotiating. We're not so much negotiating, oh, we need the house to be inspected, or we need to make sure that we have a closing date. A lot of times we're looking for the terms and we're looking for earnest money and how long the feasibility before we can get to that next stage. So, and this is part of the reason. There's a lot of things that the different city or counties will put in our way that will almost appear like roadblocks. Just take it step by step, making sure that your client has, if they have not gone through this process, that they have the appropriate links or the appropriate people to contact so they can do that work themselves. Certainly they can pay for somebody. There's guys that say I'm the landman. Be very careful on some of these people. Sometimes they say, we've done a lot of, feasibility for clients. Be sure that you're giving 2 recommendations and that your client actually has choice in who they decide to go with to help them with this process. Some builders actually will do some of the permitting. They'll build it and they'll pad it into their cost to build. So again, you just want to kind of know your clients, what their appetite is for this type of process. Have they ever done this before? Have they ever built a home on their own land before? And kind of take it step by step, because this is what your client could end up with after they go under contract.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest tips too, is if you have someone who's wanting to do a custom home, like they want to do their own, custom home and something like that. We've been hearing a lot of that up in Snohomish County too. Involve a builder early. I think most builders, those smaller builders, the custom home builders, people that do those higher end kind of homes, they would say involve us early. There's some things that we are looking for that we can kind of guide you in the right direction. And we're real estate agents, we're not builders, we kind of stay in our lane. And so advise them to get involved or vet their builder early. If they know a specific city that they're wanting to build in, let's find the builder they're wanting to use in that city. And involve them in the process of selecting the piece of land, because they'll have some insight that will be helpful as well.
And yet somebody asked a question, I think really quickly to me, just do we have this a download? Yes, a lot of the cities and counties have been able, you can download some of these checklists.
This is
Mixed.
online. Yeah, this one's from Pierce County, but every county has some sort of application checklist you can find on their website. Within usually their planning, land, some sort of division website. You're looking kind of for those keywords for their public works.
Planning department, building checklist, that's kind of what you would search for in a lot of those different websites. Great, let's go to the next slide. We're almost done. Rapid fire. I knew we'd get to rapid fire eventually, Shannon. We got there.
Yep, yep.
But marketing land. So these are just questions that we've received in the last week. I'm going to list a piece of property development, multifamily land for sale. It has a non-habitable single family home. It's boarded up on the property. Do I show this as a land listing or single family residence with value in the land? Could we do both? If there was a piece of like a house on there, would it benefit us, Shannon? Do you think?
Yeah, I think this kind of goes back to our first slide that we had for you guys, which was what is best use for the property? And so if I drive by the home and I look around in the neighborhood and I see a lot of commercial, I would look around and say, well, the person who's going to pick this thing up, that clearly the house is not habitable, are they going to develop this, or is this something that they could fix and flip? What's really the best use for the property? But yeah, in short, you could double list it within Northwest MLS. They allow that, where you could list it in both
Two
multifamily
categories.
and single
Yeah.
family.
I think
Yeah.
that was the answer I gave this guy that's with Best Choice. It was like, why not? Right? Let's list it in two different categories because it could be an investor that's looking and trolling vacant land listings, and it could be somebody looking for, single family or multifamily in this case. So could be either one. We are listing 20 acres raw land in Arlington. Do you know how I can get a picture from Google Earth or other and draw the property area around it like this? Shannon, how do we handle this one?
Yeah, this one I would be careful about you disclosing like who did the lines, right? So normally when you see these on the listings, the listing agent, if they've done a good job, will just notate, buyer to verify boundaries of the property, right? So make sure you always have some sort of disclosure to that effect. But the people who are doing the lines on these photos are either the listing agent, the seller, or the photographer. So again, just make sure you have the disclosure on the listing photo when you do some sort of line like this, but it is helpful to identify. That's why they do this. I mean, this particular property, if you were to look at it, you've got someone who's living down here. You've got like a little yellow car situation down here. You don't want to have someone pull in, think they're buying this property and when it's right next to it. So the lines are helpful when you have them on bigger parcels like this.
Just make sure you annotate the picture, I would say, and make sure the photo is your photo, not somebody else's photo from a past listing. Please do not do that. Make sure that you have the rights to the photo and that you annotate it so that the line is for visual representation only. Buyer to verify, lot lines to their satisfaction, something like that. Okay. Is that the last one? Yeah, we got there. It's a lot to take in. There's a lot to train on a land. Let's go ahead and open up. I did get a few questions, Shannon. Let me see if I um, open up my chat window. I'm not used to
I'll had a quick question. Do you advise the seller do a feasibility study so it can be marketed better for potential buyers and sold for more money? I would just say the more that the seller has about the land, the better it is. So if they've had it pumped, or if they've, the septic, or if they've done a perk, or they've done a survey, all of these things will help. And helping that property look better. The more that's been done to the property, the more valuable it could be deemed, right? So it just kind of depends on where, when, all that good stuff. But one of the other things while we talk about feasibility study real quick, I have people that ask me all the time is, who do I contact for feasibility study? Who's someone who will just do it all? Just like an inspector would just do a whole home inspection. Is there someone that does a whole feasibility study for me? What would you say to that, Rochelle? We get this
I'd
all the
say
time.
we do, yeah. And you get what you pay for sometimes.
Yeah.
And people will, it depends about your client. It really depends on the situation. That's why I'd say give a couple different recommendations. We have a really good relationship, I would say, with Chicago Title on the west side of Washington. And I think it's because of the relationship that I have with Mike Appleby. He's a senior vice president. He's done a lot of land acquisition and that type of work. So I'd start with your title company and involve them in some of your decisions and knowing where to go when it comes to local recommendations. He gave me a guy one time, and that guy started turning out to be a little bit not so good. So then I started referring a different guy. So you just have to be up to speed with who are people using if you're needing that type of help. So if you do run into those types of good experiences that you had with people doing feasibility, be sure to let the group know. I mean, that's something that would be really, really well received amongst our group on our Facebook group. If you run into people that are doing good work for feasibilities or checking things out, or a lot of the builders will actually have their own team of people that will go out and do that type of work too. It really depends on the project,
It's,
Shannon.
yeah, and it's very, I would say it's very special. For the most part, it's very specialized. Depends on what type of feasibility you mean. When you say feasibility, it just means what's feasible. So what is your buyer wanting to do with the property? Is it build? Is it just keep for quiet enjoyment? Is it to fix and flip? I mean, what are they wanting to do with the project? And kind of start there. And if they're wanting to do a build, okay, well, then we probably need to have some sort of, it doesn't need to be cleared. Does it not need to be cleared? Start with the first step first and then give them recommendations from there.
I mean, I'll give you
Um,
guys an example too. Somebody asked about surveying. Do we have a surveyors? Same thing. Surveying is part of sometimes the feasibility period. My mom, she was deciding she wanted to get she thought she was going to do a lot line adjustment, which required a surveying line of one of her parcel, one of the big 4 acres. So she went ahead on her own, bless her heart, she took my advice and she went ahead and got a survey done, or attempted to get a quote for a surveyor to do a lot line adjustment. She got 3 different quotes. One was 10,000, one was 25,000, and one was 40,000. And they hadn't, one guy actually, or one of the three actually toured her property or drove by her parcel. So why the variance? Why the difference between 10, 25, and 40? Well, it depends on the company, how they're structured, the time that's going to take, and the questions that they're asking. And one guy obviously was better than all the rest. So it's not all what you get, what you pay for either. It's kind of depends on how they're structuring their company and the kind of questions and whether it's a good fit for that buyer or that seller. So be careful when you're hiring those types of vendors, or you're recommending those vendors, that you don't lock yourself into, this is my guy, and then that guy drops the ball. I know that we've had some deals that I've lost personally in the past because I only recommended one person. Always give a couple recommendations. That way, if one guy drops the ball, that you're not stuck with, somebody that did a bad job, and then it's a reflection on you. Okay.
Yeah, another question is, can you recommend a few builders who specialize in custom home builds? So for something like this, I would not, I'm not gonna boil myself down to a couple builders. I think it really just depends on what the client's looking for. There's different grades of custom. I could tell you that much. And so I think one of the best
Shannon,
things,
we're part of the, sorry to butt in, but
yeah,
we're part of the North Idaho Builders Association. We're part of the NIB, no, North Idaho Business Builders. So they are all part of that
yeah,
club. And I can't talk tonight. And also the Master Builders Association in the Puget Sound region. So there are builders that paid their dues and that are part of that. I would start there. If you're
yeah.
not, you're not quite sure about whether they're quality, whether they run good books, whether they follow through, they have good subs. I would probably go with somebody who's willing to belong to a group, like one of those groups, before you'd, make sure they're on that kind of club,
Yep.
rather than just
And I
get
think what I
somebody.
found too is, we've had a sister of ours that built a house recently too, and she kind of had an idea of who to use, but then she also consulted the neighborhood pages for that area. And she's like, who's used this builder before? What's been your experience? To get some testimonials and things like that too. So something to kind of think about as well. Um,
All the questions on my side, Shannon, unless there's some from you. If you guys want to unmute, this is the end of the session tonight, so happy to answer any questions if you have a specific question you want to share with the group.
I think that's it. I think my takeaway is no lot is going to be identical. There's there's not necessarily a tried and true process. Every property will be different. And we roll with the punches and we just gather. We are gatherers. We don't want to overhelp, right, Rochelle?
That's right. And you know what? Partner with, we have plenty of brokers all across the states of Washington, Oregon, and Idaho here at Best Choice Realty. And I'm sure if somebody said, Rochelle, I want to partner with you, I mean, from another company might not want to do that. There's a little bit of skin on that one from the very beginning. But with any of you, I think we could find a good partner. If you're unsure and you want to partner, again, that partnership to me means splitting all of the gathering and the marketing and the advertising. It has to be a fair exchange between two partners. I think that we could find a partner if you're unsure or taking a project that's a little bit bigger or outside of your comfort zone. You know, that might be an opportunity where you want to reach out to Virginia or to Candace or Shannon and say, hey, I could use some help here. Can you help me with the partnership? And let's figure out how we can make this work so that the client is best served by the experience that we have within. So with that, I'll let you guys go.